What's going on, gurus? My name is Nick, and I am back here today to discuss the network utilities for SOAR integration. Now, specifically, what we're going to be doing with this one is this used to be a larger integration called FN Utilities. It's gotten broken down into a bunch of smaller utilities. But what we're going to use this integration for is actually connecting to other computers or other systems, maybe a script server where you've got a bunch of scripts that your enterprise maybe uses or already has built to perform specific tasks within your environment. And we want to be able to kick those automations off from SOAR without having to log into that system and fire them off that way. Just putting a command in on the SOAR side to be able to run those scripts. So the way that we're going to do that is actually using this network utilities for SOAR integration. So let's go ahead and start doing that. All right, first what we're going to do, of course, is we are going to download this integration here. Once we get this downloaded, we are going to install the integration into our environment. All right, as you can see, I've already got this installed here. So the next thing we're going to have to do is actually configure it. We go into our app config here. We can scroll down and we can see all of the config settings that are available. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set it up similar to how I've got it set up here. First things first, we have to define our remote computer. Our remote computer, our first one, is actually going to be a Linux server. And then I also have added a second computer here that is going to be our remote computer for Windows. So the way that we're going to do this is we are going to have to define our connection information within these variables. So I created secrets because I do have passwords that are visible on those. So the way that we're going to define those is actually listed right above. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a username, colon, and whatever that password is. And then we are going to give the @ symbol and that server name, either the server's system name and fully qualified domain name, or the IP address, or however you normally connect to that system. That is how we're going to want to do that. We will supply that information, and then we're just going to turn that into a secret. Just like every other time, you add a secret, you give it a variable name, you define that connection string down here. Once that connection string is in there, then of course, if you want to encrypt, if you're on version, like I said, I think it's 48 or higher, then we can encrypt it. Otherwise, if you don't have this version yet, then you will not be able to encrypt it, but hopefully you'll get there soon. Once we get the secret created, then you're going to go ahead and hit that create button, and it is going to create a new secret for you over here. And then, of course, we just hit that copy button so that we can paste that variable right here in what that remote server is equal to. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple other sections we want to look at. By default, the system already has these environments set up: NSLOOKUP, dig, traceroute, whois. Those are going to be local commands that we can run from the integration itself to just perform quick searches for doing a whois lookup, doing a traceroute, doing a dig, doing that NSLOOKUP, so that we can provide some information back. However, if we want to start getting into doing some more advanced stuff, that's when we get into actually looking at things like, I've got an integration we'll be showing here today, which is actually going to be using Nmap. We're going to be doing Nmap. We're going to be doing base64 to get the results back from the Nmap results if we decide to do the XML download. And then, of course, if we needed to do something like maybe an echo into a block list that we're going to use for a firewall, we have the capability of doing that as well. So we can write to a file on a remote system and actually add to that if that's how you're setting up your content filtering. I know that that's how we set up ours on my previous employment, so I want to show how that's done here as well today. The other thing we can do is up here in the top section, I separated my commands out by the Linux commands and the Windows commands. So in the Windows command section, if I wanted to build a command like the testnet connection or something like that, I can also do that in a similar structure to how I've got this here. It's just going to invoke this on a command shell. All right, once you get all of that actually documented here on how you want to run those commands, then the next thing we're going to do is go ahead, test your configuration, make sure you get that successful. And then after you get that successful, then you're going to save and push those changes and ultimately deploy your app just like I've got done already here. From here, let's go ahead and dive into the playbooks. All right, the first playbook I'm going to show is going to be an add to content filter. Now, this one is not available out on my GitHub because this one is going to be set up however you need to set this up, wherever that file exists on your own environment. We can set this content filter up by jumping into our app.config file again, scrolling down and creating a echo command here, which is actually going to echo the value of an artifact into a block list text file that we've got here. So keep that in mind. That's how we're going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to make sure that we use the double greater than symbols here. That way we can add to that filter, add to that text file instead of writing new every time. After we get that command created, then what we're going to do is jump back into our playbook. We're going to create a playbook, which, like I said, I've already got this one created. And for this one, we are going to have the artifact activated here. We are going to not have a form, but we will have a condition. Specifically, what we're going to do here is set this up so that DNS names, IP addresses, CIDR ranges, and URLs can be added to this. And then that should get picked up by our content filter tool. Maybe that's Palo, maybe that's Cisco, whichever company you're using to monitor your outbound email traffic. Then what we're going to do is actually set this up as a manual activation type on that artifact. Then what we're going to do here in the network utilities, we are going to grab the network utilities Linux shell command. This is going to allow us to connect to that remote system. And from there, what we're going to do is we are going to provide it with a couple of values here. So for instance, we are using the new low code option in this environment. We are going to select the echo command, which is what we defined in that app.config file. And then we are going to separate that by a colon and the remote computer that we are connecting to. So this one was remote computer. You'll remember that the Windows one was remote computer _ Windows. So that's how we're going to delineate which computer we're connecting to here. So you can have lots of different computers in there. You'll just have to know which one you want to run this on. We also have the ability to add our username and password down here if we want to do that. We are not going to because we went ahead and defined that when we defined the remote computer. So we will skip this section and move to the last section. The last section is just going to grab the value of that artifact, and it's actually going to go ahead and hand that off into the variable network utilities shell params. That's going to then use the params to pass that to it. So if we jump back to our app config, we'll take a look at that. Here in our app config, you can see we've got these sections down here with the Jinja template down here where we've got the double brackets open and close with shell param 1 inside of it. Now, the way that we handle this is the shell params are a comma separated value. So you're going to hand it to the shell param and hand that to the function, which is going to be that comma separated value of parameters. And then what it's going to do is actually parse that up and break that at every comma, and then each one of those is going to be defined as shell param 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, however many params you have. So if you're trying to define how your params should be laid out here, that's how you're actually defining what each one of these shell params are. So that's like in here, I've just got one shell param 1, but up here in my nmap command, I've got shell param 1, 2, and 3. Back here in our playbook, after we've defined our function and defined how we want to lay this information out here, then of course we are going to have to provide an output name. So we're going to do the echo output here. And then last but not least, after this gets done, we can jump down here into our add block tag. And what this is actually going to do is use the tagging feature built into the product to actually go ahead and add a tag to this artifact that this has been blocked and added to our content filter. So you can see down here, if I open up our script, I just did a quick script to say artifact, add tag, and blocked. After we get that integration complete, or after we get this playbook complete, then we can go ahead and run the integration. So let's go ahead and take a look to see how this integration works. All right, so now we've got our environment up here. We've got our SOAR test incident on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, I have my test environment where I have that block list .txt file sitting. You can see here, if I run the command, it currently has nothing in it. And now if I go into my artifacts and I decide to add this 8.8.8.8 IP address to that filter, what I can do is actually, gotta change this because my font size is too big, but I can hit the playbook here and add to content filter. Once that playbook runs, it's going to connect to that environment. It's going to add that artifact to the value. And then what we can do is go check it again to see what that filter actually has contained in it. All right, so rerunning that command now, that cat command, we can see that that 8.8.8.8 address has been uploaded to it. Now let's add one more IP. Maybe another IP that we want to add is this 172.16.101.100 address. We can click the actions, add content filter, and it's going to rerun that. Come back out here to our incident level again. We can see that it successfully ran that. Now let's go ahead and check the filter again to see what we've got in it this time. And you can see now we're just appending to that each time, so we can add to that content filter and build that out however we want. Now this is a fairly simple command. Let's go to something a little bit more complex. That's going to be the nmap command. And this one I have built out and it's available out here on my GitHub. So let's go take a look at that. All right, now we're looking at the nmap playbook that I've got built. So let's go ahead and click on that and take a look to see what we've got here. Now, the first thing we're going to notice is I'm not just using the network utilities here. I'm also going to be using the SOAR utilities down here. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be pulling down the base64 content, which would actually be the base64 content of the XML file if you chose to pull down the XML data. And we'll add that as an attachment to the incident. But let's start here at the top. First thing we're going to do, this is going to obviously be a manual one. We don't need to run an nmap scan for every single artifact that gets added or anything like that. So we're going to be running this as a manual. It's going to be running on an artifact, and the artifacts that it will be running on are your DNS names, IP addresses, any CIDR networks, or a system name. From there, I built an activation form. The activation form is going to ask for the type of scan that you want to run. If you want to run an nmap script scan instead, you can do that. I've only got one currently defined in there, but of course you can customize this to add any kind of scripts, nmap scripts you want to run in here. And then we've got any script arguments that you would also like to add. The OS identification is also available here. So if we want to run the OS identifier, we can select that flag as well. Same with if we want to run specific ports, we can actually choose that as well, so that we can choose the ports and not just run on the top 1000, which is what nmap does by default. Then if you select this one, you'll need to fill out the port section here, which will give the ports that you actually want to use. Next, we've got the service and versioning. This is going to be testing the versioning of each one of those ports to see which version of what software is actually running on each one of those. You have the ability to add verbose logging if you want additional logging. And then, of course, that XML output, which is what I mentioned this side of the playbook is for. From there, once you fill that form out, then what you're going to be doing is actually going to be using the Linux shell command, just like we did for the echo command, to actually run the nmap command. Now this one's going to take a little bit more detailed setup, so we're actually going to have to use a script. So let's take a look at that script. From here, we've got our script where we are going to be taking whatever value they decided to do on the scan and actually defining what that scan is. So if they chose a SYN scan, it will add the SYN flag scan for Nmap. So of course you can customize this if you want to add or remove any scan types. Those are available in here. Just update this. Next, we're going to be dropping down into, we need to grab the artifact as the host. From there, we're also going to be defining the script type if you decided to go with a script scan. Otherwise, what we're going to do is actually jump down into defining the ports that have been selected if a port request has been suggested. And of course, we'll start adding those other flags like the service versioning and OS identification. Finally, when we get down to the output, we're going to be defining how we want this output. Of course, we're always going to be getting the actual text back, so we'll be able to see that output in text, but maybe you want to run the XML through some kind of automation system or something like that that uses that Nmap output XML file. If you want to do that and you selected to grab the XML output, then it is going to grab that XML for you and add it as an attachment. And that's what we are defining here at the bottom. After we've got all of this defined, then what we're going to do is post the computer that we want to run and that command that we want to run. And last but not least, we are also going to be adding the shell params and joining those together in a comma separated value. Now, this is one thing that I do want to touch on. There's been a recent update to the app. This update has actually allowed us to do comma separated values as well in here. So specifically for those ports, the ports are a comma separated list of ports. And what we're going to first have to do is actually replace that comma separated port list with a backslash comma. The backslash comma is going to allow us to say that this is specifically a commented comma instead of a comma that is separating a different shell param. So this is how you will deal with having a comma separated list as a parameter by itself instead of each one of those comma separated values being its own parameter. After we get all of this defined, now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the next section. Of course, we need to define the Nmap, but then we're going to go into the report type. This is going to do the verification of, did you request the XML or not? So we've got a quick decision point here, which checks to see if you requested a XML output. If you did, then it's going to take the XML path here. Otherwise, it's just going to take our regular path over here. The XML path is going to take you out here. We are going to again run another command. This time it's going to be a base 64 command. So when we ran that first command, if you chose to do XML, the XML is actually going to be written to that local environment. But we want to be able to download that to our SOAR system. But the way that we do that is actually by reaching out to the system and doing a base 64 results. So we're going to name the output as those base 64 results, but we're going to use this function here to actually supply the Nmap results to our pre-function script. Then what we're going to do is we are going to name the shell command, the base 64 command this time, and then that remote computer, which is our Linux computer. Then we're going to parse some information out. And essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just parsing out the name that we gave it so that we know that we grabbed the right file on the system and supply that name to our param. And that is what we're going to look up. Now, one thing I do want to note is when you're doing these commands, if any of these commands are going to take a pseudo option, they have to be in, pseudo mode to connect to the network and run some kind of thing. Nmap, for instance. That does require pseudo. What we're going to do is in our config, when we are defining our computer, we are going to have to define that as a root user. We cannot add pseudo to the beginning of our command or anything. As you see here, I did not add pseudo to the beginning. If it requires pseudo privileges, you have to use the root user here. All right, back to our script here. Once we get all of that defined for the base 64, then it's going to turn that XML file into a base 64. And then what we're going to do is take that base 64 information, use the SOAR utils base64 to attachment to actually grab the file name from the nmap results again. And then we're going to take the base64 content and from the base64 command and actually apply that to the base64 content of this function. Last but not least, define it as a text or XML file and give it the file name that we've already parsed out and the incident ID so it knows where to place this back to. Once we get this function configured, of course, you have to give it a name. We're not going to use anything from that name, but you can give it the attachment output name. And then we're going to have this last script that is just going to grab those nmap results, post the exact command that was run and the results back to the incident in a rich text format, and it's going to then apply that as that note. So let's go ahead, now that I've walked through this entire thing, and see how that works. All right, back here within this environment, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run that nmap scan on the 172.16.101.100 IP address here. So I'll click here, and then I will click on the nmap scan. This is the form that I mentioned before. This is the form that we're going to fill out. So first, they're going to fill out the type of scan. We're going to go ahead and select this as a SYN scan. And then what we're going to do is we are going to select that we want OS identification, that we want to run the port scan on individual ports. We'll give it the ports 22, 80, 443. And then we will say, go ahead and give us the service versioning. We will go ahead and not do the verbose output. And last but not least, we will go ahead and collect the XML output. Now what we're going to do is hit the execute, and this is going to run that nmap scan on our remote system for us. All right, we can see here that the nmap scan has finished running. That does take a second to run because it is doing a scan on lots of different things on that system. Of course, the more you build that scan out, the longer it's going to take, but it's going to be more thorough for you as well. So let's go ahead and first jump over to the notes and attachments. From here, you can see that the output shows the actual information from that nmap scan, starting with the initial command, and then following with the actual outputs of the scan itself. Next, we're going to see over here that we actually have a new scan output XML file here. And if we actually go ahead and download this file, we can actually see all of the XML information that came back from that scan. And maybe this is going to be something that you need to have to be able to pass into another automation or something like that. All right, now that I've shown you how to do that, now the next thing I want to show you is all of the playbooks that I've created specifically for this. So when we jump here into my GitHub page, I actually have a bunch of different commands. So I've got the dig command, the ns lookup commands, the trace route command, and the whois command. These commands are all going to give you the capability of doing those base commands that come with the platform itself. If you don't want to use I believe that they still have workflows in them. So if you don't want to use the workflows, you want to use playbooks. I've already built the playbook versions of those workflows right here. You can download these and install them and use them within your environment. Next, I have a res file, which is an organizational output, which allows you to import this into the organization menu. If you're looking to see how to do that, feel free to take a look down here in the notes and the documents. It is important to keep in mind that the res.z file and the res file with just an S do get imported in different ways, and they also require different things. The res requires you to have already installed the application and will not bring that application with it. Last but not least, we have the nmap command. The nmap command is that one that I just went over. You can go ahead and install that and get that running. It will install the nmap utilities and the SOAR function utilities for you already so that it will work for you. And then there's just some configurations that you have to do down here on the bottom to get that command ready to be run. All right, and with all of that said, I hope that this video was very beneficial to all of you gurus. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. And either way, leave a comment down below of what you liked, what you didn't like, what you need to see for your own environment. And we will try to get whatever content we can out for everybody so that we can help you move your environment along and make yourselves more secure. And of course, we hope to see you gurus next time.